The parable of the pipeline: how anyone can build a pipeline of ongoing residual income in the new economy. Burke Hedges. You can become the millionaire next door. Dear reader, 100 years ago, it was virtually impossible for the average person to become a millionaire. Take a look at these lifestyle statistics at the turn of the 20th century. In 1900, the average wage in this country was 22 cents an hour. The average worker earned between $200 and $400 a year, well below the poverty line at the time. Only 6% of all Americans had graduated from high school. Life expectancy was 47 years old. Only 14% of the homes had a bathtub. There were 8,000 cars in the United States and only 144 miles of paved roads. Until WWI, the average American family spent 80% of their income on the basic necessities of food, shelter, and clothing. In a word, 100 years ago, there were basically two economic classes, the rich and the rest. Only 1 in 10 families was upper class or middle class. Which means that in 1900, 90% of the people in the US would have been classified as poor. Middle class still living paycheck to paycheck. Flash forward 100 years to 2001. The median family income today is $47,000. There are more cars in this country than people. Most families own at least 2 TVs. Life expectancy is L75. Today, average people have more disposable income, more leisure time, and more career options than ever before. Yet most of the nation's 72 million families are still living from paycheck to paycheck. Take away equity in the family home, cars, and furniture, and the average family has 0 assets. 0. While family income is up, so is family debt and hours spent working. What's wrong with this picture? Are you plugged into the wrong system? What's wrong is that too many people have bought into the wrong plan. They're plugged into the wrong system. And they lack a fundamental understanding of how wealth is created and accumulated. I'm going to make a bold statement that may shock you. But it is absolutely, unequivocally true. Ready? The simple, unvarnished truth is that today, becoming a millionaire is a matter of choice, not chance. That's right. Today, virtually anyone earning a middle-class income can become a millionaire. Impossible? Not at all. Actually, it's really quite simple. If you want to become a millionaire today, all you need to do is follow these 3 steps. 1. Understand how wealth is created and accumulated. 2. Copycat proven systems of wealth creation. 3. Be consistent over time. That's it. That's all it takes for average people to accumulate $1 million in assets: understanding, copying, and consistency. What you will learn in this book: you will learn proven strategies that average people can follow to create true financial freedom for themselves and their families. These strategies are simple to follow and time-tested. They have created millions of millionaires over the last 50 years. Folks, becoming a millionaire is no longer a matter of good fortune or good luck. It's merely a matter of learning and following proven strategies for wealth creation. In the words of the best-selling book, The Millionaire Next Door, the large majority of millionaires are not the descendants of the Rockefellers or Vanderbilts. More than 80% are ordinary people who have accumulated their wealth in one generation. Think about that, more than 80% of millionaires are ordinary people. This statistic proves what I said earlier today: becoming a millionaire is a matter of choice, not chance. 3. My goal in writing the parable of the pipeline is to teach you the strategies the wealthy have used for centuries to create and accumulate wealth. These strategies were once reserved for only the privileged few. Even if you knew these strategies back in 1900, most likely you wouldn't have had the cash or the contacts to take advantage of them. That's not the case today. Today, by virtue of improved technology, an increase in middle-class wages, and an innovative business model I call e-compounding, virtually any middle-class person with a high school education or above can leverage their money, time, and relationships to create personal and financial freedom. By following the strategies outlined in this book, you, too, can become the millionaire next door. Welcome to the neighborhood. Yours truly, Burke Hedges, for The Parable of the Pipeline v. The Parable of the Pipeline: How Anyone Can Build a Pipeline of Ongoing Residual Income in the New Economy. Copyright 2001 by Burke Hedges and Steve Price. All rights reserved under international and Pan-American copyright conventions. Written permission must be secured from the publisher to use or reproduce any part of this book, either in print, video, audio, or digitally via the Internet, except for brief quotations in reviews and articles. Printed in the United States of America, first edition, January 2001. ISBN 1-891279-05X. Published by Inti Publishing, Tampa. FL. Cover design, Cherry. Design layout, Biographics. 6. Dedication to everyone who has the wisdom to become a pipeline builder, and the willingness to share that wisdom with others. 7. Acknowledgement. Discipline, determination, focus, and patience are the words that come to mind when I think of Dr. Steve Price, who was the backbone to the successful completion of this manuscript. Steve, you're extremely talented and relentless in seeing a project through from beginning to end. I appreciate you, and in my eyes, you're truly a priceless partner. I'm forever grateful to Catherine Glover, President of Inti Publishing. Catherine is a leader extraordinaire, and her input and attention to the details throughout the creation and development of this book were invaluable. I want to thank Donna Morrison for the outstanding job she did in creating the easy-to-read layout. Donna, you're always a pleasure to work with. A great big thanks to Liz Cherry and her creative team for their wonderful cover design. Cherry Design hit a home run in conveying the awesome power of residual income. Any acknowledgement I make would not be complete without thanking everyone at Team Inti. Sandy Lorenzen makes Inti operations run like a Swiss clock. Dee Garand designed and oversees 5 of the best websites in the industry. Cindy Hodge not only runs the warehouse efficiently, she does it with a smile on her face and laughter in her voice. Jewel Perigo, CFO, is a computer expert and accounting whiz rolled into one. What would we do without you, Jewel? 8. Lastly, I want to thank my father for stressing to me when I was a teenager that in life, pipelines are my lifelines. Thanks for your patience and timeless wisdom, Dad. 9 books by Burke Hedges, who stole the American dream. You can't steal second with your foot on first. You, Incorporated Copycat Marketing 101 Read and Grow Rich DREAM-BIZ.com X underscore 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 on Contents 11 from the desk of Burke Hedges. Your pipelines are your lifelines. It's been 25 years since my father passed away. But I can still remember our early evening chess games like they were yesterday. I remember helping my father set up the chessboard on the veranda of our beach house overlooking the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Ecuador. I remember watching the waves breaking against the white sand beach. I remember the fragrance of hibiscus floating on the saltwater mist. I remember watching the soft yellow sun sink below the steel-gray horizon. We'd play chess until dark. My father would talk. I would listen. Never take anything for granted, I remember him saying many times as he gazed at the horizon. One from prince to pauper in one day. Never take anything for granted. My father was referring to 1959, the year Castro took over Cuba. Prior to the revolution, my father was one of the richest men in Cuba. According to an article in Time magazine, my father was worth more than $20 million, which would calculate to at least $200 million in today's dollars. He owned 12 different businesses, including cotton mills, retail stores, a textile mill, a chemical manufacturing plant, and commercial real estate. When Castro took over, my parents escaped to Jamaica with just the clothes on their backs. My father's businesses and bank accounts were confiscated for what the communists called crimes against the people. My father's only crime was being successful, and then taking that success for granted. In hindsight, he should have moved some of his assets out of the country. He took it for granted that Castro would never be able to overthrow the government. My father was wrong. And it cost him his fortune. A premonition of pipelines. My father did his best to rebuild his dynasty. But a bad economy and a bad heart conspired to prevent his comeback. He wasn't bitter in his final days. He was just disappointed that he had run out of time. So as we played chess, my father did his best to teach me the key principles that enabled him to amass a small fortune while he was still in his 40s. My father often lectured me on the importance of owning your own businesses. Ownership meant independence and control. As far as my father was concerned, the more businesses you had, the better. Your pipelines are your lifelines, he would say. I took my father's lessons to heart. I opened my first business when I was only 25 years old. Today I own several fast-growing businesses. Ironically, one of my companies, Equibor, is a pipeline business literally. Equibor installs the underground conduit that old economy utility companies use to house their gas and water pipelines. New economy telecom companies use the conduit for their fiber optic cables, the pipelines of the future. My rich dad, his rich dad, my father was a big believer in diversification. That's why most of his 12 different businesses were in different industries. If you've only got one pipeline, then you've only got one lifeline, he'd say as he captured one of my chess pieces. The more pipelines you've got, the better. A few months ago I came across an audio tape by Robert Kiyosaki titled, "What My Rich Dad Taught Me About Investing." Kiyosaki tells a brief story about two young men who were hired to deliver water from a lake to their village a mile away. One of the young men used buckets to carry the water. The other young man built a pipeline. Over the long run, the young man who built the pipeline fared far better than the bucket carrier. 3. Kiyosaki's audio reminded me of the lessons my father taught me 25 years ago. That evening I went home and jotted down 10 pages of notes for a new book explaining the parallel between pipelines and lifelines and urging readers to diversify their income streams by building both short-term and long-term pipelines. I titled the book, "The Parable of the Pipeline." 3 months later I handed my publisher the manuscript to the book you're holding in your hands. Building your own pipelines. Over the years I've taken my father's advice and built several profitable pipelines. I don't own 12 businesses like he did. And I'm not worth $20 million yet. But I'm working on it. Pipelines are designed to take the worry out of people's lives by putting profits into their pockets. But most of all, pipelines are designed to give people personal and financial freedom and lifelong security. In short, pipelines are lifelines. My father had his lifelines taken from him by a dictator. And he never recovered. People in this country are blessed. We'll never have our lifelines taken from us by a dictator. Only we can take the lifelines from ourselves. How? By not taking the initiative to build them. Take a lesson from my father. Don't take it for granted that tomorrow will be just the same as today. Because it won't. The only security is the security of a pipeline. I urge you to start building your pipelines today, so that you'll have your lifelines tomorrow. 4 underscore 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 on introduction. The Parable of the Pipeline. 1801, Valley in central Italy. Once upon a time, long, long ago, two ambitious young cousins named Pablo and Bruno lived side by side in a small Italian village. The young men were best buddies and big dreamers. They would talk endlessly about how someday, some way, they would become the richest men in the village. They were both bright and hard-working. All they needed was an opportunity. One day that opportunity arrived. The village decided to hire 2 men to carry water from a nearby river to a cistern in the town square. The job went to Pablo and Bruno. Each man grabbed 2 buckets and headed to the river. By the end of the day, they had filled the town cistern to the brim. The village elder paid them 1 penny for each bucket of water. "This is our dream come true," shouted Bruno. "I can't believe our good fortune." But Pablo wasn't so sure. 5. His back ached and his hands were blistered from carrying the heavy buckets. He dreaded getting up and going to work the next morning. He vowed to think of a better way of getting the water from the river to the village. "Pablo, the pipeline man." "Bruno, I have a plan," Pablo said the next morning as they grabbed their buckets and headed for the river. "Instead of lugging buckets back and forth for pennies a day, let's build a pipeline from the river to the village." Bruno stopped dead in his tracks. "A pipeline? Whoever heard of such a thing?" Bruno shouted. "We've got a great job, Pablo." I can carry 100 buckets a day. At a penny a bucket, that's $1 a day. I'm rich. By the end of the week, I can buy a new pair of shoes. By the end of the month, a cow. By the end of 6 months, I can build a new hut. We have the best job in town. We have weekends off and 2 weeks paid vacation every year. We're set for life. Get out of here with your pipeline. But Pablo was not easily discouraged. He patiently explained the pipeline plan to his best friend. Pablo would work part of the day carrying buckets and then part of the day and weekends building his pipeline. He knew it would be hard work digging a ditch in the rocky soil. Because he was paid by the bucket, he knew his income would drop at first. He also knew it would take a year, possibly 2, before his pipeline would start to pay big dividends. But Pablo believed in his dream, and he went to work. Pipeline in progress. Bruno and the rest of the villagers began mocking Pablo, calling him Pablo the Pipeline Man. Bruno, who was earning almost twice as much money as Pablo, flaunted his new purchases. He bought a donkey outfitted with a new leather saddle, which he kept parked outside his new 2-story hut. He bought flashy clothes and fancy meals at the inn. The villagers called him Mr. Bruno, and they cheered when he bought rounds at the tavern and laughed loudly at his jokes. Small actions equal big results. While Bruno lay in his hammock on evenings and weekends, Pablo kept digging his pipeline. The first few months Pablo didn't have much to show for his efforts. The work was hard, even harder than Bruno's, because Pablo was working evenings and weekends, too. But Pablo kept reminding himself that tomorrow's dreams are built on today's sacrifices. Day by day he dug, an inch at a time. Inch by inch it's a cinch, he chanted to himself as he swung his pickaxe into the rocky soil. Inches turned into 1 foot, then 10 feet, then 20, 100. Short-term pain equals long-term gain, he reminded himself as he stumbled into his humble 7 hut exhausted from another day's work. He measured his success by setting and meeting his daily goals, knowing that, over time, the results would far exceed his efforts. Keep your eyes on the prize, he repeated over and over as he drifted off to sleep, accompanied by the sounds of laughter from the village tavern. Keep your eyes on the prize. Completed pipeline. The prize. The tables are turned, days turned into months. One day Pablo realized his pipeline was halfway finished, which meant he only had to walk half as far to fill up his buckets. Pablo used the extra time to work on his pipeline. The completion date was advancing faster and faster. During his rest breaks, Pablo watched his old friend Bruno lug buckets. Bruno's shoulders were more stooped than ever. He was hunched in pain, his steps slowed by the daily grind. Bruno was angry and sullen, resenting the fact that he was doomed to carry buckets, day in and day out, for the rest of his life. He began spending less time in his hammock and more time in the tavern. When the tavern's patrons saw Bruno coming, they'd whisper, "Here comes Bruno the Bucket Man," and they'd giggle when the town drunk mimicked Bruno's stooped posture and shuffling gait. Bruno didn't buy rounds or tell jokes anymore, preferring to sit alone in a dark corner surrounded by empty bottles. Finally, Pablo's big day arrived. The pipeline was complete. The villagers crowded around as the water gushed from the pipeline into the village cistern. Now that the village had a steady supply of fresh water, people from the surrounding countryside moved into the village, and it grew and prospered. Once the pipeline was complete, Pablo didn't have to carry buckets anymore. The water flowed whether he worked or not. It flowed while he ate. It flowed while he slept. It flowed on the weekends while he played. The more the water flowed into the village, the more the money flowed into Pablo's pockets. Pablo the Pipeline Man became known as Pablo the Miracle Maker. Politicians lauded him for his vision and begged him to run for mayor. But Pablo understood that what he had accomplished wasn't a miracle. It was merely the first stage of a big dream. You see, Pablo had plans that reached far beyond his village. Pablo planned to build pipelines all over the world. Recruiting his friend to help the pipeline drove Bruno the Bucket Man out of business, and it pained Pablo to see his old friend begging for free drinks in the tavern. So, Pablo arranged a meeting with Bruno. "Bruno, I've come here to ask you for your help." Bruno straightened his stooped shoulders, and it pained Pablo to see his old friend begging for free drinks in the tavern. So, Pablo arranged a meeting with Bruno. "Bruno, I've come here to ask you for your help." Bruno straightened his stooped shoulders, and his dark eyes narrowed to a squint. "Don't mock me," Bruno hissed. "I haven't come here to gloat," said Pablo. "I've come here to offer you a great business opportunity. It took me more than 2 years before my first pipeline was complete. But I've learned a lot during those 2 years. I know what tools to use, where to dig, how to lay the pipe. I kept notes as I went along, and I've developed a system that will allow me to build another pipeline, and then another, and another. I could build a pipeline a year by myself. But that would not be the best use of my time. What I plan to do is to teach you and others how to build a pipeline, and then have you teach others, and have each of them teach others, until there is a pipeline to every village in the region, then a pipeline to every village in the country, and eventually, a pipeline to every village in the world. Just think," Pablo continued, "we could make a small percentage of every gallon of water that goes through those pipelines. The more water that flows through the pipelines, the more money that will flow into our pockets. The pipeline I built isn't the end of a dream. It's only the beginning." Bruno finally saw the big picture. He smiled and extended his calloused hand to his old friend. They shook hands, and then hugged like long-lost friends. Pipeline dreams in a bucket-carrying world. Years passed. Pablo and Bruno had long since retired. Their worldwide pipeline business was still pumping millions of dollars a year into their bank accounts. Sometimes on their trips through the countryside, Pablo and Bruno would pass young men carrying water buckets. The childhood friends would pull over land, tell the young men their story and offer to help them build their own pipeline. A few would listen and jump at the opportunity to start a pipeline business. But sadly, most bucket carriers would hastily dismiss the notion of a pipeline. Pablo and Bruno heard the same excuses over and over. "I don't have the time. My friend told me he knew a friend of a friend who tried to build a pipeline and failed. Only the ones who get in early make money on pipelines. I've carried buckets all my life. I'll stick with what I know. I know some people who lost money in a pipeline scam. Not me. It made Pablo and Bruno sad that so many people lacked vision. But both men resigned themselves to the fact that they lived in a bucket-carrying world, and that only a small percentage of people dared to dream pipeline dreams. 11 Part 1 We live in a bucket-carrying world. 12 Lesson 1 Who are you, a bucket carrier? Or a pipeline builder? Bruno, I have a plan, Pablo said the next morning as they grabbed their buckets and headed for the river. Instead of lugging buckets back and forth for pennies a day, let's build a pipeline from the river to the village. Bruno stopped dead in his tracks. A pipeline? Whoever heard of such a thing? Bruno shouted. From the parable of the pipeline. Who are you, a bucket carrier? Or a pipeline builder? Do you get paid only when you show up and do the work, like Bruno the bucket carrier? Or do you do the work once and then get paid over and over again, like Pablo the pipeline builder? If you're like most people, you're working the bucket carrying plan. I call it the time for money trap. You know the drill. 13 1 hour's work equals 1 hour's pay. 1 month's work equals 1 month's pay. 1 year's work equals 1 year's pay. Sound familiar? Equals time for money trap. The problem with bucket carrying is that the money stops when the bucket carrying stops. Which means the concept of a secure job or a dream job is an illusion. The inherent danger of carrying buckets is that the income is temporary instead of ongoing. If Bruno woke up one morning with a stiff back and couldn't get out of bed, how much money would he earn that day? 0. No work, no money. The same goes for any bucket carrying job. Once bucket carriers have used up their sick days and vacation days, if they can't continue to carry buckets, they won't continue to get a paycheck. Period. No buckets equals no pay. Dentist can't carry buckets anymore. Here's a real-life example. My previous dentist was the best dentist I've ever had. She was a complete professional, a great chairside manner. Great personality. Great technician. Every visit was 14 virtually pain-free. Plus, she loved what she did, and she set her own hours. Her office was open only 3 days a week so she could spend 4-day weekends with her family. She pulled down more than $100,000 a year working 3 days a week in a job she loved. This was a bucket carrier's dream job if there ever was one. One problem. Before the age of 40, she developed arthritis in her hands and couldn't work anymore. Today she teaches at a local university, earning a net third of the income she earned as a dentist. Through no fault of her own, her dream job disappeared. Now do you see why I say there's no such thing as a secure bucket carrying job? Can you see how vulnerable bucket carriers are? The problem with the time for money trap is that if you can't trade the time, you don't get the money. Pablo the pipeline man recognized the limitations of bucket carrying early on, and he set out to create a system whereby he could continue to get paid whether he put in more time or not. Pablo understood that there's no security in bucket carrying. He understood that a pipeline is your lifeline. What would happen to you if you couldn't put in the time? What about you? What would you do if your income stopped tomorrow? 15. What would happen if you got laid off? What would happen if you got sick or disabled and couldn't carry those buckets anymore? What if a medical emergency ate up your savings? What if your nest egg evaporated overnight? If your income stopped tomorrow, how long could you pay the mortgage, make your car payments, or pay for your kids' schooling? 6 months. 3 months. 3 weeks. Your nest egg 6 months. 3 months. 3 weeks. Picture missing if disaster strikes. Do you have a lifeline that would protect you and your family? Or are you gambling that bucket carrying will continue uninterrupted for as long as you need the income? Whether you push a broom, push paper, or push a profession, you're still trading 1 unit of time for 1 unit of money. Where's the security in that? Pipelines pay while you play, as Pablo said. There must be a better way. Fortunately, there is. 16. It's called a pipeline: ongoing residual income that keeps coming in whether you put in the time or not. The only way to build true security is to do what Pablo did: build a pipeline while you're still carrying buckets. Pipelines are lifelines because they enable people to escape the time for money trap. When you build a pipeline, you do the work once, but you get paid over and over again. Pipelines are open 24/7/365. Which means pipelines can pay you while you sleep, or while you play, or while you're retired, or while you're sick and disabled and can't work, or during emergencies. That's the power of residual income. That's why I say your pipelines are your lifelines. Pipelines equals lifelines. Residual income. $17. Lesson 2. We live in a bucket carrying world. We've got a great job, Pablo. I can carry 100 buckets a day. At a penny a bucket, that's $1 a day. I'm rich. By the end of the week, I can buy a new pair of shoes. By the end of the month, a cow. By the end of 6 months, I can buy a new hut. We have the best job in town. We have weekends off and 2 weeks paid vacation every year. We're set for life. Get out of here with your pipeline. From the parable of the pipeline. A doctor driving his 4-year-old daughter to daycare left his stethoscope on the car seat. The daughter reached over and started to play with it. My daughter wants to follow in my footsteps, the doctor thought to himself. This is the proudest moment of my life. The child arranged the stethoscope around her neck and held the sensor in front of her like a microphone. Welcome to McDonald's. May I take your order? This cute story illustrates why we gravitate to bucket-carrying jobs. It's called Monkey See, 18 Money Do. The little girl had been to McDonald's so often that she mistook the stethoscope for a headset and copycat the way the employees talked to customers. Like the little girl, most people mistake bucket carrying for pipeline building. We observe that 99% of the people carry buckets. So we naturally assume that bucket carrying is the only way to get what we want in life. Bucket carriers versus pipeline builders. 1%, 99% living paycheck to paycheck, ongoing residual income. That's why Bruno had such a tough time understanding the power of pipelines. Pablo was the first pipeline builder Bruno ever knew. Bruno rejected pipelines because they were different. To Bruno, pipelines were unproven. To Bruno, pipelines were radical and risky. The vast majority of people think like Bruno. We grow up surrounded by broke bucket carriers, so we figure that's the way of the world. It reminds me of the bumper sticker I saw recently, 100,000 lemmings can't be wrong. People think the same about bucket carrying 100 million bucket carriers can't be wrong. Well, yes, they can. 19 lemming mentality picture missing buying into bucket carrying. Let's face it, there are a lot more bucket carriers in this world than there are pipeline builders. Why? Because bucket carrying is the model that our parents followed and the one they taught us to follow. The bucket carrying model tells you that in a bucket carrying world, there's what you have to do to get ahead: go to school and learn how to carry buckets. Work really hard. Earn the right to carry bigger buckets. Resign from bucket company A to work for bucket company B, which lets you carry even bigger buckets. Work longer hours so you can carry more buckets. Put the kids through bucket carrying college. Change careers from carrying metal buckets, to carrying plastic buckets, to carrying digital buckets. Dream of the day you can retire from bucket carrying. Until then, carry those buckets. Carry those buckets. What do all those bucket carriers earn for their efforts? Surprisingly little. 20 According to Parade magazine's annual What People Earn survey, the average worker in America earns $28,500 a year. Subtract almost 20% for taxes, and that leaves $22,500 to live on. Let's face it, $22,500 take-home pay isn't enough money to cover the basic needs for a family of 4. Which means the vast majority of people are desperate for more money. Bucket carriers' average pay equals $28,500 buckets on Parade. So what do bucket carriers do when they need more money? Because they have a bucket carrying mentality, they come up with a bucket carrying solution. If you need more money, you've got to carry more buckets. I'll get a second job carrying buckets in the evenings and weekends, Daddy Bucket Carrier says. I can go back to the bucket carrying job I had before the kids were born, says Mommy Bucket Carrier. The kids can get bucket carrying jobs after school and in the summer, the bucket carrying parents announce. And that's what they do. The result? Today, North Americans work the longest hours in the world, even more than the work-obsessed 21 Japanese. Is the earn more money by carrying more buckets plan working? In a word, no. Here are the cold, hard facts. Consumer debt is at a record high. Household debt in the U.S. has more than quadrupled in the last 17 years. The average household today has 95 cents of debt for every dollar of disposable income. The proportion of women working to support their families more than doubled over the past 20 years, from 19% in 1980 to 46% today. More and more people are taking second and third mortgages on their single biggest asset, their homes, to pay bills. Personal bankruptcies have increased every year to 1.4 million in the year 2000, even though the economy is booming. Hello. What's wrong with this picture? The fallacy of carrying bigger buckets. Bucket carriers reason that bigger buckets mean bigger paychecks. So bucket carriers tell themselves that everything would be okay if they could just get a job carrying bigger buckets. Bucket carriers are forever wondering how much other bucket carriers earn. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics keeps track of the hourly wages of hundreds of different occupations. How does your hourly wage compare to other jobs? 22 hourly wage, from U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, fast food cook, gas station attendant, janitor, retail salesperson, secretary, roofer, car mechanic, truck driver, firefighter, mail carrier, loan officer, computer programmer, chemical engineer, physicist, lawyer, dentist, physicians, surgeons, $6.29, $7.34, $8.44, $9.12, $11.86, $13.63, $13.97, $14.08, $15.63, $16.39, $20.05, $25.67, $29.44, $33.23, $36.49, $44.40, $49.05, assuming most people get paid for 40 hours a week, even though they probably work at least 50 hours a week, or more, and get 2 weeks paid vacation each year. Here's the annual income for 5 of the above occupations. Annual income: 1. Cook. 2. Retail salesperson. 3. Mail carrier. 4. Lawyer. 5. Physician, $13,083, $18,970, $34,091, $75,899, $102,024, Now, if you were a cook, or a retail salesperson, or a mail carrier, you might look at the annual income of a lawyer or physician and think, wow, if I made that kind of money every year, I'd be financially free. No more lying awake at night worrying about paying the bills. Bucket carriers income: 102K, 28K, 76K. Average person. Lawyers income, doctors income. True, the physician's bucket is a lot bigger than a cook's bucket, about 10 times bigger. But that doesn't mean the physician is financially independent. He's just as dependent on his bucket-carrying job as the cook or the mail carrier. Why? Simple: professionals make more than the average worker, but they spend more. Truth is, the doctors or lawyers making 6 figures a year are spending most of their income to support their lavish lifestyles. Just compare an average worker's expenses to a professional's. The average worker drives a $5,000 used car. The doctor or lawyer drives a $45,000 Lexus. The average worker sends their kids to free public school. The doctor or lawyer pays for private school. 24. The average worker owns a $75,000 home. The doctor or lawyer owns a $350,000 home. The average worker eats at Pizza Hut once a week. The doctor or lawyer takes the family skiing in Vail every year. The average worker plays golf at a public course. The doctor or lawyer belongs to an expensive country club, or two. You get the picture. People envy doctors and lawyers and accountants because they get to carry huge buckets. True, the physician's bucket may be 10 times bigger than the cook's. But the physician spends 10 times more, so they both end up in the same predicament, living paycheck to paycheck. Doctors income: doctors outgo. Picture missing buckets eventually dry up. Thomas J. Stanley and William D. Danko, authors of the bestseller The Millionaire Next Door, observed that carrying big buckets is not the same as creating wealth. The authors came to this realization by surveying people who lived in upscale neighborhoods, assuming that people who drove expensive cars and lived in expensive homes were wealthy. 25 Oops! Wrong assumption. Stanley and Danko came to this startling conclusion about wealth creation: most people have it all wrong about wealth in America. Wealth is not the same as income. If you make a good income each year and spend it all, you are not getting wealthier. You are just living high. Wealth is what you accumulate, not what you spend. How do you become wealthy? Here, too, most people have it wrong. It is seldom luck or inheritance or advanced degrees or even intelligence that enables people to amass fortunes. Wealth is more the result of a lifestyle of hard work, perseverance, planning, and, most of all, self-discipline. In other words, buckets, no matter how big they are, will eventually dry up. Pipelines, on the other hand, are self-sustaining. But pipelines require a sacrifice. Pipelines don't build themselves. You have to take the time and make the effort to build them. Eventually all buckets dry up. Picture missing average income lawyers' income, doctors' income. 26 Pipelines keep pumping. A bigger bucket won't solve the problem. Everybody would love to increase the size of their bucket. No one's going to turn down an annual raise or a better job with more pay. If bucket carrying is your only source of income, then I say carry the biggest bucket you can. That's only common sense. But the fact remains that carrying buckets is never going to make you financially free. Carrying buckets will never make your family safe and secure, no matter how big your buckets. Why? Because as long as you carry buckets, you have to show up and do the work in order to get paid. The day you stop carrying buckets, that's the day the money stops coming in. Illness or injury, layoffs, retirement. Man's bucket carrier has gone from the millionaire next door to the bankrupt guy next door because he neglected to build pipelines while he was carrying buckets. When his bucket dried up, so did his lifestyle. Pipelines are your lifelines, my father used to say. Are you beginning to see why? 27 Part 2 Your pipelines are your lifelines. 28 Lesson 3 The power of the pipeline. But Pablo was not easily discouraged. He patiently explained his pipeline plan to his best friend. Pablo would work part of the day carrying buckets and then part of the day and weekends building his pipeline. He knew it would be hard work digging a ditch in the rocky soil. He also knew it would take a year, possibly two, before his pipeline would start to pay big dividends. But Pablo believed in his dream, and he went to work. From the parable of the pipeline. This is the tale of two polar opposites, a big-time baseball player and a small-town elementary school teacher. They couldn't be more different. One was a young man and one was an elderly woman. One was paid millions a year and the other never earned more than $0,000. One lived his life in the spotlight. The other lived her life in a small town in Massachusetts. But these were only small differences compared to the personal and financial choices each made. You see, one of the people you're going to read about built pipelines and retired a multi-millionaire. The 29 others stayed a bucket carrier and, as I write this, is teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. The stories are about two very different people, but that's not what's important. What's important is the choices they made and the lessons you can learn from those choices. After you hear these two tales, it should be crystal clear why building pipelines is the only way to create true security and true financial freedom. Your choices equals frustration equals freedom. The Ballad of the Ball Player. Let's begin with the tale of the famous baseball player. Over the years, this talented athlete has made some bad choices, both personally and financially. His personal choices have led to a broken marriage, alcohol abuse, and drug addiction. That's bad enough. But his financial choices have been just as bad, for he's also broke. I'm sure you've heard of this athlete. He's been in the spotlight for almost 20 years now. His name is Darryl Strawberry. His story is a cautionary tale for what you should not do in order to achieve financial freedom. Darryl Strawberry has been playing professional baseball for almost half of his life. The 38-year-old outfielder broke into the major leagues when he was 30, still a teenager, and was immediately hailed as the next Ted Williams. Strawberry has made a fortune during his career, somewhere between $2 and $5 million a year. And that's just from playing baseball. Add another couple million a year from endorsements, personal appearances, speeches, and autograph signings, and he's earned $50 to $100 million before his 40th birthday. Strawberries don't field forever. A guy making that kind of money has to be set for life, right? Wrong. According to a local newspaper report, Strawberry has no income or savings to support his current wife, Charisse, and their 3 children, $100 million and not a thing to show for it. What happened? He spent it. Expensive houses. Expensive cars. Expensive lawyers to defend his run-ins with the law. Expensive divorce. Expensive drug and alcohol rehabilitation clinics. As I write this, Strawberry has been suspended from playing baseball, which means he has no income coming in. The only things still coming in are the bills. And they come in day after day, month after month, as steady as the rain in a monsoon. 31 Picture missing big income, bigger outgo. How to become the millionaire next door. The second tale has a much different ending. It's the tale of a small-town teacher named Margaret O'Donnell, and it proves that you don't have to carry big buckets in order to build big pipelines. Ms. O'Donnell taught school for more than 50 years. When she retired in her 70s, she was making around $8,500 a year. When she died at age 100, she left almost $2 million to 10 different charities, including her church, schools she attended, and a Boy Scout troop. How could a woman earning less than $10,000 a year accumulate a small fortune? Simple. She built a long-term investment pipeline by making regular monthly investments in quality stocks and allowing them to compound over time. Building long-term pipelines plus little income stocks, bonds investments pipeline equals prosperity. 32 Margaret enjoyed stocks, said her broker, Bob Wolinsk. The first time I met her, she threw 3 papers on my desk and said, "What should I do with these dogs?" referring to some stocks that weren't doing well. Over the next 20 years, Margaret's portfolio bloomed to include a collection of blue-chip stocks, tax-exempt bonds, and utility stocks that she held until her death. She rarely touched any of her investments, enabling her retirement pipeline to grow year after year after year. Small sacrifices, big results now. In case you're thinking that Margaret was one of those penny-pinching spinsters who clipped coupons and saved used tea bags, you'd be wrong. She ate out often with friends, drove a late-model Buick, and frequently flew to Europe to enjoy long vacations. She didn't deny herself the pleasures of life. But she also showed discipline and restraint in her spending. And she saved and invested each and every month, even in retirement. You see, Margaret was the classic example of a long-term pipeline builder. She started saving and investing in her early 20s. And she continued right up until her death at age 100, as you'll learn in the coming chapters. Pipelines grow bigger and bigger over time. 33. Growing your pipelines 50-year 10 25-year 111 5-year. Like Pablo, pipeline builders may not have much to show for their efforts during the first few days or even years. But consistent, disciplined efforts over time can transform small contributions into huge dividends. Pipelines keep pumping after buckets run dry. Now, do you understand what I mean when I talk about the power of the pipeline? Darryl Strawberry has carried a huge bucket for years. And what does he have to show for it today? Nothing but boxes of canceled checks. Strawberry has had 20 years to build pipelines. If he had taken just 10% of his earnings and put the money to work by building an investment pipeline in the stock market, he could have had a lifeline worth between $20 million and $100 million by now. But he didn't. Missed opportunity. No pipeline means no residual income. Strawberry assumed his big bucket would never dry. Wrong assumption. Buckets don't automatically replenish themselves, no matter how 34 big they are. That's because the bucket carrier has to lug the bucket to get it refilled. When he stops lugging, either through retirement, or illness, or injury, or burnout, the bucket starts drying up. Pipelines, on the other hand, keep pumping profits long after buckets run dry. That rule holds true for big bucket carriers, just as it does for small bucket carriers. As I said, it's not the size of the bucket that counts. People with big buckets tend to be big spenders. The key to financial freedom is to adopt a pipeline building mentality and then to put your pipeline plan into action. Big bucket model. Big bucket, big expenses, small assets. The smaller the bucket, the bigger the need for a pipeline. Earning a lot of money doesn't guarantee financial independence. Only pipelines can do that. If you don't adopt a pipeline strategy, your bucket will eventually dry up. I tell you the story of Darryl Strawberry to exaggerate a point, namely, if a bucket as big as Darryl Strawberry's can dry up, what about yours? 35. Think about it. Strawberry lived from paycheck to paycheck. What about you? Strawberry acted as if his bucket carrying days would never end. What about you? Strawberry foolishly spent money and wasted time when he could have been using it wisely to build a lifeline. What about you? What about you? Sure, Strawberry made some bad choices that cost him a lot of money. But his worst financial choice was his failure to build pipelines. That's unforgivable. What was he thinking? Margaret O'Donnell, on the other hand, had the wisdom to build pipelines while she was still carrying buckets. When her bucket-carrying days came to an end, her pipelines kept pumping and the cash kept flowing. It's your turn to choose now. I ask you, which financial situation would you rather be in? Daryl Strawberry's or Margaret O'Donnell's? If the answer is Margaret O'Donnell's, then you need to start building your pipelines right away. 36 pipelines are lifelines because they're self-sustaining. They may need priming from time to time, and repairs, perhaps even rebuilding. But pipelines can keep pumping profits year after year. Your choice. Picture missing your choices, not chance, determine your destiny. Both Daryl Strawberry and Margaret O'Donnell had a choice. Daryl Strawberry chose buckets. Margaret O'Donnell chose pipelines. They made their choices. Now it's your turn to choose. 37 Lesson 4 Leverage, the power behind the pipeline. 1. The pipeline was complete. Pablo didn't have to carry buckets anymore. The water flowed whether he worked or not. It flowed while he ate. It flowed while he slept. It flowed on the weekends while he played. The more the water flowed into the village, the more the money flowed into Pablo's pockets. From the parable of the pipeline. Leverage is an awesome concept, a civilization-altering concept. In fact, without leverage, you wouldn't be holding this book right now. Let me explain. In 1440, a young German entrepreneur named Johannes Gutenberg converted a wine press into the world's first commercial printing press. He printed 180 copies of the Gutenberg Bible and sold them all within a few days. Gutenberg's printing press was an immediate success. Within decades, printing presses had sprung up all over Europe. By the mid-1600s, there were 8 million printed books circulating in Europe, which was 10 times the number of books that had been produced during the previous thousands of years combined. Books by bucket carriers versus publishing by pipeline builders. The Gutenberg press shattered the books by bucket carriers paradigm. Prior to Gutenberg, books were hand-copied by scribes and monks. One handwritten book could take years to produce and were so expensive that only royalty could afford them. Gutenberg changed all that. With the printing press, the printer set the movable type once, and then could easily produce thousands of exact copies. The printing press. In the books by bucket carriers model, there's a 1-to-1 ratio between efforts and results. 1 hour's effort produces 1 hour's result. If it took one scribe 1 day to hand copy 1 page, then it would have taken him 100 days to turn out 100 pages. Books by hand model. Enter the printing press. The pipeline building model. Let's say it took a 16th century printer 1 day to 39 set the type for 1 page, so that by the end of the day, he would have produced just 1 printer's proof copy. But look what happened in day 2, printing press model. The printer came 1 hour equals 100 pages into work and pressed 100 copies. In other words, a printer could produce in 2 days what it would have taken the scribe 100 days to produce. That is the power of leverage. In the pipeline building model, the ratio between effort and result is no longer 1:1. When we use leverage, the effort remains the same, but the result can be 100 times greater, 1,000 times greater, or even millions of times greater. 2 kinds of leverage, Time and money. The root word for leverage, lever, comes from an old French word meaning to make lighter, which is an apt description of the power of leverage. By employing a lever, a big load can be made so light that a child could easily move it. When we apply the principle of leverage to time and money, the same thing happens. The results are compounded. 40. For example, in the case of leveraging time, 1 hour's effort can result in 100 hours of production. 1 week's work can result in 1 year's production. 100 hours result 1 HR effort. In the case of leveraging money, each dollar invested over time can compound until it grows to many times the initial investment. Picture missing $100 result $1 investment. Classic examples of leverage. The printing press is an example of how people can leverage their time, money, and efforts. Leverage shatters the equation of 1 unit of time for 1 unit of money. Leverage allows people to work smarter, not harder, and it's the power behind every pipeline. Leveraging time, hiring employees, is a classic example of how people can leverage their time. Let's say you want to open a restaurant. It would be impossible for you to act as the host, waiter, chef, dishwasher, and bookkeeper and still run 41 a profitable business. You can only be in one place at a time, so you fire people to perform certain tasks. If you pay your 10-person staff an average of $10 per hour, you're paying out $100 an hour in wages. If your restaurant takes in an average of $1,000 per hour in revenue, the difference after expenses goes into your pocket. 10 hours or more leveraging time in a small business. 1 hour leveraging money. A classic example of leveraging money is investing in the stock market. No doubt you've heard of Warren Buffett. He's a living legend on Wall Street and the second or third richest man in the world. He built his fortune the old-fashioned way. He leveraged other people's money and made himself and his investors rich in the process. How rich? Check this out. If you had invested $0,000 in Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway stock back in 1965 and left it where to grow year after year, by 1998 your investment would have been worth, hang on to your hat, $51 million. Wow! How would you like to own that pipeline? 35 years ago, 1 share of Berkshire Hathaway stock cost only $19. By the end of 1998, 42 that single share was worth about $70,000. Which means that you could have leveraged a $300 investment in 1965 into $1 million today. Unbelievable. Leveraging dollar in Berkshire Hathaway. Picture missing $1 million result stock $300 investment. Pipelines are worth building now. Do you understand the power of leverage? Berkshire Hathaway stock is living proof that with leverage, the results are disproportionate to the effort. Think about it. How much effort would it have taken to accumulate $300 back in 1965? 2 or 3 days' work, maybe a week's work at the most. Just imagine when the $300 was invested, you wouldn't have to do any more work because your pipeline was already built. The only other work you'd have to do is check the stock prices in the newspaper every now and then. Ask yourself, wouldn't it be great if you could turn $300 into $1 million without having to lift a finger? 43. Can you see how the wise use of leverage can multiply a little money or a little time 1,000 times over? Doesn't it make sense to find a mechanism whereby you could leverage $1 into $100? Or 1 hour into 100 hours? Wouldn't it be great to do the work once and let leverage do the rest? Folks, if you'd like to enjoy the benefits of leverage, then you need to do what pipeline builders such as Pablo and Warren Buffett did: find a mechanism to leverage your time and money today, and enjoy a big reward tomorrow. Result: your time and money, your mechanism. 44 Lesson 5 Money Leverage, the Palm Beach Pipeline. Just think, Pablo continued. We could make a small percentage of every gallon of water that goes through those pipelines. The more water that flows through the pipelines, the more money that will flow into our pockets. The pipeline I built isn't the end of a dream. It's only the beginning. From the parable of the pipeline, legend has it that one of the ancient emperors of China fell in love with a new game called chess. The emperor decided to reward the game's creator. He summoned the inventor to the royal palace and announced to the court that the inventor would be granted one wish. "I am honored, Your Highness," the inventor muttered humbly. "My wish is that you grant me 1 grain of rice." "Just 1 grain of rice?" the startled emperor asked. "Well, just 1 grain for the first square of the chessboard," the inventor said. "Then doubling to 45, 2 grains for the second square, 4 grains for the third square, and so on until the single grain has been doubled for the entire chessboard. That is my simple wish." The emperor was well pleased. "I have been given such a wonderful game at such a cheap price," he thought to himself. "My ancestors have smiled upon me today." "It is done," the emperor cried. "Bring out the chessboard and let everyone here witness our agreement." The court gathered around the chessboard. A kitchen servant produced a 1-pound bag of rice and handed it to the inventor, who smiled as he opened the bag. "I suggest you return to the kitchen for a larger bag," the inventor said to the servant. The court laughed loudly, mistaking his comment for sarcasm. Then the inventor began placing the grains of rice on the board, doubling the number of grains as he went. A graph missing. The onlookers laughed and nudged each other as the first row of 8 squares was filled. 1, 2, 4, 16, 32, 64. 128 grains of rice. But the giggles soon gave way to gasps by the middle of the second row. 4 small piles of rice soon doubled to small 46 bags of rice, which doubled to medium-sized bags of rice, which doubled again to big bags of rice. A graph missing by the end of the second row. The emperor knew he had made a huge mistake. The grains owed to the inventor totaled 32,768 and there were 48 squares remaining. The emperor stopped the game and called in the land's wisest mathematicians. They tossed the beads of their abacuses and made hasty markings on slate boards. After much fussing, the mathematicians reached a unanimous conclusion: a grain of rice doubled for every square on the 64-square chessboard would calculate to 18 million trillion grains of rice, a quantity equal to all the rice in the world multiplied by 10. The emperor halted the demonstration and made the inventor an offer he couldn't refuse. If the emperor were released from his word, the inventor would receive a country estate with hundreds of acres of fertile rice fields. The inventor gladly accepted. Everyone toasted the inventor and congratulated him on his wisdom and cleverness. And he happily retired to his estate, enjoying many, many years in splendid comfort. 47. The doubling concept, eighth wonder of the world. The story of the emperor and the inventor teaches us the power of the doubling concept. This concept has been around since the first bank paid the first wealthy merchant interest on a deposit, so it's time-tested and proven. The inventor and the emperor's mathematicians may have been the first people to recognize the power of duplication, but they certainly weren't the last. Centuries later, another famous mathematician named Albert Einstein recognized the awesome power of duplication, or compounding, as it's sometimes referred to, calling it the eighth wonder of the world. The doubling concept has become such a cornerstone of wealth creation that I call it the Palm Beach Pipeline, named after the ritzy city in Florida where hundreds of the world's richest heirs own sprawling estates overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The rich people in Palm Beach don't have to work for money. They make money work for them. How? They invest large amounts of inherited money in pipelines that churn out huge profits year in and year out, whether the investors work or not. Palm Beach pipelines are fueled by the doubling concept, which means the lucky heirs can enjoy a fabulous lifestyle, while they get richer in the process. That's what I call having your cake and eating it, too. 48. The Rule of 72, the rule of the rich. To better understand how rich people get richer, let's take a look at the Rule of 72, a mind-boggling wealth-building concept that the world's top investment brokers teach their rich clients. The Rule of 72 is a simple formula for calculating how many years it would take for an investment to double. Here's the way it works. Doubling concept or Rule of 72. 1. Determine the annual interest rate on your investment. 2. Divide the interest rate into 72. 3. The result is the number of years it takes for your investment to double. For example, let's say an heiress invests $100,000 in a stock that pays an annual return of 10% per year. Here's the Rule of 72 in action. Rule of 72 in action. Step 1. $100,000 original investment. Step 2. 10% annual return. Step 3. 72 divided by 10 equals 7.2 years profit. $100,000 would become $200,000 in 7.2 years if the heiress didn't spend the profits or her principal. The original investment of $100,000 would double to $200,000 in 7.2 years, to $400,000 in 14.4 years, to $800,000 in 21.6 years, and $1.6 million in 28.8 years, and on and on. As you can see, the longer the money is allowed to compound, the bigger the size of the pipeline. 49. By leveraging the power of compounding, people who inherit million-dollar fortunes can live like royalty and still leave an even bigger fortune for their children. The magic of compounding is the reason that thousands of heirs named Kennedy, DuPont, Firestone, Ford, Rockefeller, and Getty can continue to live a life of luxury without their fortunes drying up. In effect, their bucket never runs dry because the pipeline keeps pumping year after year, for decades, or in the case of the Rothschild heirs in Europe, for more than 2 centuries. Kids and money. Fortunately, pipelines built by leveraging money aren't reserved just for rich people. Average people can take advantage of the doubling concept, too, as we learned from the story about Margaret O'Donnell, a low-paid school teacher who amassed several $1 million by leveraging her money in the stock market. So, how do average people leverage their money to create a long-term pipeline? The best way to answer that is to tell you about a powerful little book called Kids and Money by Michael J. Searles. Actually, the book could be titled People and Money, because the principles outlined by Searles apply to young and old alike. Searles, a former power broker on Wall Street and father of four, recommends a simple system to teach kids to manage their money